Welcome to Heart, Stories and Support from the Long Short Road, a weekly radio show where we explore the depths of mental wellness, sharing valuable insights, inspiring stories, and practical tools for healing. I'm your host, Lee Yaffe, founder and director of the Long Short Road. My guest today is Dovid Meshchaninov. Dovid is a licensed somatic and trauma therapist. He works with a variety of trauma-informed therapeutic modalities, including somatic experiencing, IFS, EMDR, and craniosacral therapy. Dovid works with individuals and couples and is based out of LA. And on a personal note, Dovid is also my brother-in-law who is married to my twin sister. Um, Dovid, welcome to the show. I'm really grateful to have you here.
Likewise, it's exciting to talk and be able to talk about such valuable and important things to my heart.
Yes, I am really grateful for your time. Thank you. So to begin, could you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey to becoming a therapist and your work with so many different somatic modalities? Like, where did that start from for you?
Okay. So for in my personal journey, that sort of started, I would say, when I was 21. And I was definitely at a crossroads in my life. I, at that point, was living in Israel, was single, and sort of trying to find myself. And I knew there was healing I had to do. But I just had this such a strong intuitive sense that if I was just sitting in a chair and talking to someone about my struggles, somehow, even if that, might bring some benefit, I just knew like it needed to be something more, right?
Yeah.
I just had this sense like it's something about that. I had just this impression that I didn't want some like, Freudian guy sitting there like taking notes like in a more like what's the word, like one up, like listening and me the patient down there. Something about that whole setup in my mind didn't feel right. And then I ended up, the first modality that I was exposed to was actually cranial sacral therapy.
Mm.
And so that's a very gentle hands-on technique that's really amazing for helping balance the nervous system, for helping people drop out of their mind and more into their body, for getting out of like the head and more into the emotions in the body.
Mm.
So when I was on the table and doing this work, it was so valuable for me and something clicked. I'm like, oh, this feels like healing. Like
Mm.
I'm something here, like literally, the practitioner's hands on me and me feeling into it and releasing something and connect to emotions. And what that is, what part of that was, is on one hand, that is somatic, right? Connecting into the experiential sense of the body, but it's also just in general, just getting to more kind of experiential healing.
Yeah.
So that could be, and that's, where other modalities then came, if it's IFS, like doing experiential kind of inner child work, or EMDR, anything like that, but where you really dropped into the work in a real way. And that's sort of been my passion since then.
Wow, beautiful. Um, and I know that there's many things that you're passionate about in your work, but one of the things that you're passionate about that I want to explore with you is this concept really of establishing emotional health and emotional wellness in our day to day and embodying emotional wellness. And I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what that looks like for you and how you think that, or what your thoughts on are how people can create emotional well-being in their lives in the day to day.
Yeah, good question. So maybe before I jump to answer that, I'll just say, like on this topic, right? I think it's so understandable and so human, like especially an adult, or let's say especially parents that are juggling so much, right? Kids, work, relationship, whatever, just trying to take care of our own needs.
Hmm.
As long as there's no, let's say, crisis, then we just sort of try to juggle everything we have to juggle, right? Um, and it's like, oh, how am I doing? Like I'm doing fine.
Right.
Um,
As long as there's
then
no
if,
fire to put out, then you're okay.
right, right. And I guess when you're saying like, I forget the exact wording of your question, but I would say the first step, right, to emotional well-being and take care of oneself is trying much more frequently, really slowing down and really trying to get a sense like, how am I really doing, right? Even if there's no fire right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like deep down, like, okay, maybe everything's sort of okay, but maybe I'm feeling a little sad about something. Okay, can I maybe have the courage just to realize that's going on and not put that at the bottom of my list? Like one day in 10 years, maybe I'll deal with that, you know?
Right. Or deal with it when it implodes into something much bigger that's much more complex to handle.
Right, right. Or maybe you're just feeling like in your nervous system, it's like not so settled or it's stressed or it's anxious. Maybe not saying, like this is just life. It's saying like, okay, something feels not in full alignment. Can I first just notice that? Can I first try to find the headspace to realize that maybe we can try to work with that and address that and try to find tools to improve it. So I think, I think it's a mindset shift that instead of it being at the bottom of the list, maybe higher on the list. And then I think that a next obvious point is, of course, our state of well-being affects everything, right? It affects how we show up to our kids. It affects how we can show up to our spouse, how we're able to show up to the world, to our work. So I think the reward, there's so much reward if we do it, but at first it seems like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do.
Right, right. Especially when you're like in a sense of survival mode of like, oh, there's so many things that feel pressing. Slowing down and checking in with myself doesn't feel like a high priority.
Right, right. But yeah, but I think that has to be, think if we can, that's probably the first step and like the first key, like
Right.
just asking, how am I really doing? And can
And
it
what
be?
and what you're saying is, if I understand correctly, if I'm tell me if I have this right, that oftentimes it's people kind of see their well-being as black and white. Like either I'm, like if I'm not bad, then I don't necessarily have to pay attention to like people. I've heard a lot of people say over the years to me that like they didn't realize how bad they were, how much pain they were in, or how sad they were, or how much grief they were holding on to until something really huge happened that forced them to slow down and pay attention. But you're saying we don't have to wait for it to get to that place of emergency to spend the time checking in on ourselves.
100%, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really but that's like it's also hard to do, right? So then how do we like what are some practical things that people can do to help them slow down? Because like I know for myself, I am go, go, go from the minute I wake up until I go to sleep. And even me, who like I know that I should be, dropping in and taking care of myself, it's really hard to come out of that pattern, right? Especially when it's a pattern that's very much like ingrained in your brain. So, what are some things that people can do to um kind of start coming down into their bodies and slowing down?
Okay. Okay. So it just came to me like if someone's nervous system, and this is a little bit connected to somatics, is in a, let's say a very like it's in a high mode, right? Let's say a little wound up, or you said go, 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 right? So then maybe even not maybe saying, okay, try to lay down, and just on your back, in that like Shavasana yoga position, right? Where we just lay on our back and try to drop in. That might be too much, like too much of an adjustment. I don't know
Right.
what if we
Extreme,
go, sorry?
because it's an extreme from one to the other.
Exactly. And
Right.
and that can be hard. Like if one's nervous system is all wound up, right? And you're saying, okay, I need to just like lay down on my back, which is another tool we could get to, right? And try to just breathe and tune in. That might be too much. So what if maybe we say, what if we leave the phone in the house and just go for a mindful walk
Mm,
around the block,
hmm.
trying to connect back into oneself, right?
Right.
Maybe even just noticing, just getting a little more present. So just noticing the trees as you're walking, feeling the air and the breath. And as you're walking, just starting to ask, okay, how am I doing emotionally? what am I carrying? Just getting a little more in touch with themselves as they're doing a walk, maybe. And the walk allows a little release of pent up energy in the system. So
Right.
something like that, I could imagine might be doable, especially if there's like more of an activated nervous system.
Sure.
Could also do a hybrid. So let's say you're in your room or dining room or living room, wherever you want to do the yoga. Maybe you first start just allowing yourself just to walk around a little, shake out a little, take a breath or two standing up, and then sit down. Try to maybe sit for a minute, take a few breaths, try to center a little, but then give yourself permission to get back up.
Right.
Maybe shake out a little, shake your arms, take a couple breaths like that, move a little of that anxious energy, and then sit back down in a mindful place. Try to feel how your body feels after that. And you could do a few rounds, but again, we're honoring that just trying to sit for 5 minutes straight or 10 minutes straight might be too much.
Right.
So we can go like sort of play with a little bit like movement and then a little bit stillness, a little bit like shaking it out and a little bit stillness.
Yeah. I like that. I like that hybrid. Something that just came to mind for me that I want to ask you about because I know that this is a technique that you use and I know that this is something that people could really benefit from, but maybe don't understand a lot about is cold exposure and using like cold water and cold plunge. Um,
Okay.
I'm curious if you could explain a little bit about like how that works and I'll just preface by saying like maybe not everyone has access to like a cold plunge, like a actual physical cold plunge, but even taking a cold shower could have that like positive benefit. Um, could you share a little bit about like how that works as a regulation tool for people?
One thing is I could think, let's say you're in a rut, right? You're just going through your week, and you're just in a rut, like one, day flopping into the next one, right? I find like if like in the middle of my week, like a Wednesday morning, I do a cold plunge, it like helps break up that rut
Yeah.
because it's so in a way it's jarring and like and afterwards you come out and it helps, I would say, to reset if
Hmm.
you're in an emotional rut. So that's one thought that comes to mind, right? You know what I mean? Those
Yeah.
weeks where it's just like one day is just like you're just surviving to the next and you're not
Yeah.
even all the days just sort of, smushing together,
Yes. Very
right?
familiar with that kind of experience.
So I feel like something in the cold exposure, like yeah, can just sort of um making a sort of bringing a shift to that, right? It's just
Yeah.
like a change. It's just like
Yeah.
suddenly like, wow, what like I even though it's only maybe 3 minutes in the cold or a couple minutes in the cold shower if you're able to get one. But something afterwards can help make a shift just mentally a little bit, emotionally a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's one thought. Another thought is also like it can allow like the adrenaline and some of the survival hormones from the depends how cold you go, but that come, it can allow access to certain aliveness and a certain energy afterwards that can then be used to be like, oh, I feel like I really do now maybe want to do like spend some time maybe just walking in the sun or something, but maybe before you wouldn't even have had that aliveness because of just the overwhelm of life. And the cold, I think, can sort of jar us to find a little more sense of maybe what do we need. Like what I would suggest also is like if one does the cold, to have a little time afterwards to like integrate it, right? Maybe you're feeling some energy or maybe just want to sit in the sun, but it sort of brings out some energy, I find.
Yeah.
And one last one, I mean, let me just think. Some people find that it ultimately is regulating, I think, for their nervous system
Mm.
or their immune system, because in some ways, like so many systems have to sort of just like let me try to think of the word, galvanize or something. So
Yeah.
it like jars them all up and then somehow they could find maybe a better equilibrium after.
Yeah, no, I definitely can attest to having had that experience with doing cold words. It like it really kind of it is. It's a jarring shock, but it can be um it can be a positive experience.
Yeah, and obviously to try to go in mindfully and not just like freaking out and stuff. That
Right.
also you
I can't
get
remember where I like um I heard someone speak once about their experience of doing cold exposure and doing a cold plunge and that they didn't even make it for a full 2.5 seconds in the water before they were out. And you really do have to like, we're talking, I think, I don't know if this is, tell me if I'm wrong or if this is something that you maybe resonate with also. I find that with a lot of modalities and techniques that are becoming popular today, people kind of go into them mindlessly, like, oh, this is a cool thing that I should try out because everyone's doing it, it's on social media, and everybody that I know is doing all these things. We forget that we have to go in with like a mindful awareness of what the experience is because a lot of these healing experiences require a lot of energy from us and also require us to be open to what comes, and not always what comes out is pleasant, right? Like the cold plunge experience is not always a pleasant experience. It can be very intense. Um,
Yeah,
but
100%. I'm really glad you said that because yes, so many things. This is a deep, I want to sort of stress this point for a minute. Like if as remember we spoke about that walk around the block earlier, right? So if you're doing that walk, just like, oh, I'm supposed to, like my doctor said, or it's healthy to do a walk around the block, but you're sort of disconnected from the experience, right? You're not mindful with it. You're not trying to embody your body or your feelings or be with that presence.
right.
The value of it is so much less than if you were doing that, right?
Think intellectualizing the experience or not being mindful about it cheapens the benefit.
100%. Yes, because when the mind and body are sort of trying to get in sync, so much more magic happens. Exactly. So as you said, if someone's just like, oh, I'm supposed to, I saw this is a good thing just to go in a cold plunge and come out.
Right.
Yes, if if your mind, exactly, if there's the mindfulness during that obviously helps actually your system get much more out of it. And then afterwards, as I said, trying to feel that aliveness, right? Trying to breathe with it, trying to feel maybe you feel sense of calm after or whatever.
Right.
If you're not present to any of that, for sure you'll miss a lot of those benefits.
Right. Right. That's a big one that I think people miss out on a lot. We kind of just go in with this with the more logical or less embodied perspective of just doing it for the sake of doing it and not reaping the benefit that could be there if we drop in.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I said also like give yourself some time after. Like if you do an actual cold plunge, try to give yourself maybe 10, 15 minutes after, to, as we said, to try to sense like, okay, do I feel more aliveness? Do I maybe want to jump around a little? Do
Right.
I maybe want to just smile and relax? Like let that come into your system so that, yeah, you can get the benefit.
Yeah. And I think it's probably like that with any other, like even this going back to this very simple concept of going for a walk around the block without your phone and like being physically present to your walk. When you come back into your house, don't immediately go to your phone and like, stick your head back into the whirlpool of social media. Like maybe keep taking a break for another 20 minutes,
If you can,
if you can.
amazing.
Right. I mean, halabai that we should all be able to do that. Um, Yeah, sometimes I'm gonna admit something that like I'm a little bit embarrassed about, but sometimes, especially like in high season for the long short road when there's a lot going on, I will sometimes like check my email in my sleep. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night in a start and like with one eye still closed, I'll like lean over, look at my phone, make sure that nothing urgent came in, and then like disconnect again. And I think that it's such a crucial like it's so imperative that in this time of history that we're in, where we are so connected to the outside world all the time, we must be taking time to connect with ourselves and not be giving all of that energy away all the time.
Right, right. And the thought that just popped in my head, right, is we see naturally and spiritually, there's always a flow between being on and off, right?
Right,
Like we're on in the day, and then obviously we're supposed to have to transition to off in the night, right?
right,
And we're on in the week, and then we're supposed to try to transition to off on Shabbos.
right,
So for sure, like when you were talking about the sleep thing, I would think even a little, if there could be a little, I'm trying to think of the word, I forget the word, but a little moment to help you transition right out of the being on, right, and
Right.
all the world off. I imagine that might help your nervous system. Like even
Yes.
if it's that 3 minute walk, but in the evening, if that, maybe then just when you're like, okay, now I'm sort of trying to transition back to my body or something, or even some kind of closing ceremony for the day, like, okay, I have better sleeps, honestly, when I literally like power down my phone.
Yeah.
And I find that's like sending a message to my psyche and my nervous system like that it's off.
Right.
And then so I think that's a great tip, by the way. And then
Yes.
the next morning, it also helps because then you, it's off, so you don't go to it as often and as quickly. And then I could, it could have a better start to the morning, say my
Right.
brachot and get ready. And then when I'm ready to turn it back on, I turn it back on.
It's just such an important reminder, I think, of like, how important it is. There's this concept that I remember learning years ago in a meditation program about the difference between standard time, the like so to speak time of like the consumerist mentality and horticultural time, which is the time of nature and how
Mm,
differently what like how different the flow is between the two and how our bodies and really like the way Hashem created us is to be able to tap into that flow of horticultural time and there's a season for everything and even like the way our bodies work with circadian rhythm like and the way that women's menstrual cycles work it's all meant to help us align into the flow of our highest self and that does mean that there's times where you're right. There's times where we're on and there are times where we're off. But I do think that we've lost that in many ways in today's society. And it would be a good idea for all of us to tap back into that.
yeah, yeah, okay. And thank you. Yeah, well said. And that reminds me, something your sister has taught me. And there's, that babies, right? Especially newborns and all that, they're totally like just trying to find their own biological rhythm,
Yeah.
right? As you said, like not based on, oh, it's 2 o'clock or whatever. So that means we're supposed to be out of the house now or we have to be up now. It's like they have this inner, their nervous system is trying to find its right flow.
Hmm.
And when parents can attune to that, not to be like, oh, it's 9 o'clock, that means you have to be sleeping or this, more attuning to yeah, to their nervous system and their flow that's unfolding, that ends up being the best attunement for the baby. And I guess if we could do that a little bit for ourselves also, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, does it feel like my system needs to slow down a little now or something like that?
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. Debbie, with the few moments that we have left, I wonder if you have any guidance or thoughts for any of our listeners on how they can start to approach tapping in. I know you gave some suggestions before, but if you have any other thoughts on how people can just start to embrace, approaching their emotional well-being, and also if you have a message of hope or healing for anyone who's listening and struggling right now.
Yeah. Well, how to approach it. Well, as we said, one, to know that it's such a beautiful part of life is this continuous evolvement and checking in and healing and inner growth, right? So not to feel like, oh, it means I'm damaged or I have issues, if it means I have to like start to connect into myself. And as you said, not to wait till one there's a crisis and our life are falling apart or we can't handle it. But realize I really think part of Hashem's vision of our journey in this world is continuously being in our inner process
Yeah,
and being in our inner growth. And as we said, like that's not like we're like now having like when do we get back to real life? When am I when am I get to do the real life? Like that is part of life.
right,
Continuously, like, because life is also, there's the past healing, but there's also every moment there's new seasons of life, right? We maybe have children, or maybe change jobs, our relationships are going through things, spiritually we're evolving, and our inner world is always interfacing with that.
right.
So so having the mindset and the courage to keep like saying like what's going on, how can I try to notice it? How can I try to work with it? How can I try to support it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, obviously, any kind of outside assistance is great. Maybe you could go to a class, a breathwork class or a mindfulness class or even a yoga class or more professional, if it's working with uh, a therapist, that has this lens of more kind of experiential or embodied work.
Right.
And then it's, when it's on oneself, as I said, not to underestimate, just simple things. As I said, just trying to connect into the body. Like, how's my body doing? How's it? Like, literally, if I slow down enough and try to feel what it's holding, how's it doing? What emotions, what stress is it holding? Maybe can I journal that a little? Can I try to breathe and just help it come to a little bit more of balance or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe a cold plunge, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and I think you asked about hope. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so what I'll say about hope, for some reason, I thought about this earlier today.
You must have known I was going to ask you.
Right, I don't know. Yeah, but I would say this, that I think this is such a powerful word of hope that especially those who may be listening to this and it's like, that doesn't work for me, right?
Right.
Or like all this, or maybe they've tried therapists and this. I really believe that if things haven't worked, it's because you haven't been presented with the right tools for your system.
Yep.
It's much more about the people who have been trying to support you than you, right? um, I really feel that there is healing out there for everyone, and it's about finding the right keys and the right tools. There's for one person, it's maybe more gentle cranial sacral work. For another person, they need like IFS work or somatic work
Right.
or breath work. There's so much out there. Even there's sometimes psychedelic healing that can be helpful for people. So there's a lot out there, and it's hard when people have had a lot of disappointments. But
Yeah.
I think if we can keep just asking for Hashem to send us the right shluchim, there is healing out there for everyone, is what I would say.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, David, for being here and for making time out of your busy day to be here with me and have this conversation. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
David can be found at dovidtherapy.com and reached at dovidtherapy@gmail.com. Discover how the long short road is making a difference. Visit us at www.thelongshortroad.com or reach out at info@thelongshortroad.com to learn more. On behalf of the Long Short Road, this is Lee Yaffe reminding you, hope is here and it starts with each of us. Together, we're walking this long, short road to healing. Good night.